Hello everyone, welcome to the first episode of Things Your School Probably Didn't Teach You, because I know mine didn't. Today we're going to be talking about John Paul Jones, or at the beginning of the story, just known as John Paul. He was a British sailor, and he started sailing when he was 13. Now, an interesting thing about sail ships and the way that piracy worked and the way that captains of sail ships operated their ships was that there was this thing called an avant-cast or something like that. And essentially, it's how you are able to map out where you're going, where you've been, and you kind of map out that course. Well, interesting fact, a lot of captains wouldn't teach how to use this specific thing to their crewmates, because then, if the captain is the only one who knows how, no mutiny is possible, because nobody is able to map a course back home. Nobody is able to kind of take over the ship and figure out where they want to go. It's all up to the captain. He holds all the cards, even if the crew is kind of fed up. So, because John Paul started apprenticing on a ship at the young age, the ripe age of 13 years old, the captain of the ship didn't really feel threatened by him at all. And so he was like, yeah, sure, let me teach you how to do it. Who cares? I don't mind. And so John Paul learned, which was a skill that very few sailors had at the time. Years later, after his apprenticeship is done, he is working on sailboats because that's his trade. That's what he knows how. Mind you, at this time, slavery is a big thing. So most of the ships that he's sailing on are slave ships. And John Paul is sickened by this. He cannot stand working on slave ships. It's degrading, and it's hard, and it sucks, and he feels awful doing it. So he kind of, they drop him off in Jamaica, and he doesn't even go back to Britain on the ship. He says, nope, I'm done. Whatever. I quit. Throwing in the towel. And nobody stops him. They say, all right, you're out. And he's not the captain, so they don't need him. And they sail away and leave him in Jamaica. Well, he spends a few months just begging ships to take him back to Britain. Because, it's essentially like asking a taxi driver in New York for a free ride up 12 blocks. That's money, and it's not going to happen. But eventually, after months of begging and starving, one ship says, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. You can hop on, you'll have to work, though. Whatever. The captain dies, and the first mate dies. So now, Jean Paul is the only man who knows how to figure out where the ship needs to go. Knows how to map the course, and knows how to use this particular tool that was designed for just this situation. So he is now the captain of the ship. Kind of a rigorous captain. He wasn't all buddy-buddy with the crewmates. Very much, you do what I say now, or you get punished. So, one of the people on the ship, I don't remember the particular job, I think it was a carpenter. A carpenter is on the ship, and he is kind of giving mouth to John Paul. And so, leading with the iron fist that he does, he flogs this carpenter. Well, when he gets back to Britain, the carpenter tries to sue him, saying he beat me, and it was not okay. And, the British Navy looked at it, and they're like, well, no. I mean, he's the captain, and for what you did, the flogging was a appropriate punishment. Well, a few months later, the carpenter dies, and John Paul is arrested, and it's because the father of the carpenter says that him flogging his son, the carpenter, led to the carpenter's death. Well, months probably, pass, and he is allowed to go out of the prison. He goes to the physician, who writes him a note, and it says pretty much, yeah, no, this guy died of catching a fever. The beatings that I observed when he returned to Britain from the ship were not fatal, were fine. Okay, so that's fine, and then he goes to, the captain of the ship that the carpenter was on when he died, and the captain says, no, what? He caught a flu and died. You went to prison for that? And, so Jean Paul is excused. So then, the British Navy is like, yeah, here, take a ship, because at this point he's practically a bona fide sailor. You know, he works for them. He's a captain, a bona fide captain of the British Navy. He is going, and he's going back to Jamaica for something, I don't know. But pretty much the crew is trying to mutiny because he is somewhat of a jerk. The guy attacks him. This guy on the crew attacks him, and John Paul, I think, decapitates him. I don't know for sure how, but he kills him. And now he's already gone to prison for a killing that he didn't commit. He's like, if I go back, no matter what the circumstances are, the entire crew is going to testify that I murdered him in cold blood because they don't like me. So, screw it, I'm out. And he gets off the ship, Bahamas, Jamaica, somewhere in Central America, and he thumbs it on another boat up to Virginia in North America. And there he meets Thomas Jefferson and a couple other patriotic people. They're telling him about this revolution, and they're telling him about their cause, their noble cause, and he's like, I don't really care, and they're like, and we're gonna fight the British. And John Paul is like, hell yeah, we are, I'm in. So, little thing, at this point, John Paul added the Jones to his name, because at this time in history, adding another word to your name, you're a different person. There's no records, yada yada yada, he's gone. He's in another country, and his name is not Jean Paul, his name is Jean Paul Jones. George Washington is like, hey, Jean Paul Jones, you are a sailor. Would you want to work in our navy? He goes, yes, sure, that'd be awesome. So then they send him to France to go make friends with the French, because they need allies for this war with the British that they can't fight on their own. And he goes to France, and he's a womanizer. He's just sleeping with all of the women there, not really making friends with anybody because he's kind of a prick. And eventually they're just like, oh my god, fine, take some ships and get out of here. He's like, oh, okay, thanks, great. So they give him this little ship called, I don't remember what it was originally called, but he names it the Little Richard, because of George Washington's writing, the Poor Richard. Yeah, and they give him a small fleet of like 4 or 5 other small ships. So, what Jean Paul Jones decides is the smart idea for what he wants to do is he's going to take his little ship and the other small little ships behind him, his Little Richard, and he's going to go along the British coast, and any ships that he sees, he's going to set fire to, that are British. Any British ships that he sees, he's going to set fire to. Unfortunately, the crew that he assembled while in France is just privateers. They're just pirates. They don't care about the British or the American cause, so they're just like, oh, we're on a ship? Let's loot it. Let's kill them, and let's do whatever else. They don't really care about setting it on fire to send a message to the British. It gets to this point, and many ships later, the privateers are all rich at this point. John Paul Jones is the leader of a small, well-known fleet of ships out near one of the British coasts or something like that. He's out, and they come up to this British ship, this just gargantuan, it's called like the Cypress or something like that, just a big old ship, against the Little Richard, which is small, and doesn't really stand a chance. Well, this is where John Paul Jones' famous quote comes into play, because a couple hours into battle, the Little Richard has 3 cannonball holes straight through the bottom of it, is lit ablaze, on fire, and sinking into the ocean. And they give him the option to surrender, and he stands up on his sinking, aflame ship and says, I have not yet even begun to fight. And 3 hours later, the British surrender. What happened in those 3 hours? We don't know. But apparently he was right. A lot of speculation, a lot of people are like, well, he had 4 or 5 other ships, and they took out the British Cynthia, or whatever the name of the huge British ship was, and then he took that ship. They surrendered, and then he took the British huge, giant monster ship, brought it back to them. He went to France, and womanized again there, just sleeping with all the women. Great times for him, right? Well, people were kind of sick of him. When he died, they're like, okay, fine. They put him in a pauper's field, and they gave him a headstone. Several years later, I think it was Roosevelt, they were trying to establish, like, a hero or like a well-known leader of the American Navy at its founding. And they're like, well, John Paul Jones sounds pretty cool. And they chose him. They dug him up from France, and they sailed him back on just huge fleets of American ships. And now he's buried in Annapolis. And that's the story. Wild ride, to be certain. Something that I was never taught in history that I just learned recently from my sister, who is a 3rd grade teacher. But a story that I thought was really cool, and I wanted to share with more people. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Alrighty. Editing this is going to be a blast. Thank you for watching, and God bless. Bye.